이번엔 9번째 교재 프로파일을 택해봤습니다. 전 레이건 행정부 시절 문교부 장관을 지낸 바 있는 그 윌리엄 베넷 얘기죠. Preacher, Teacher, Gadfly라는 제목의 프로파일. 마시와 짐의 낭독을 들어보십시오.
Profile by Ezra Bowen. Preacher, Teacher, Gadfly.
It has been a dazzling bit of footwork, even for a world-class dancing man like William Bennett. Since he took office in February 1985, the brash Secretary of Education has turned himself into the most visible and surely the most audible member of the Reagan team. During the primaries, he flirted with various presidential aspirers who eyed him as a running mate. "I dance with all the girls," he chuckled. So was he hungry for higher office? "I'm not running for anything," he said. Amid a riptide of administration defectees, Bennett held fast.
William Bennett was also one of the very few Reagan team members who didn't get fried in the Iran-Contra scandal either. Then on May 9th, Bennett told Reagan he was quitting in September to lecture and write. But no kiss-and-tell stuff. "That's not my style," he growled. Bennett, however, has more than one agenda. He is consulting with the Republican Platform Committee as it prepares for next month's convention, where he will be a prime-time speaker. Top Republicans have approached him about running for the Senate. He adds, "After watching some of the people in the stakes for the presidency, I could do better than that. As a vice presidential candidate, I'm not sure I'd make a very good number 2 man," he retorts. "I like to run things."
If Bennett likes to run things so much, then how come the American education system is in the shambles it's in today? Yeah, Bennett's a real hard-driving genius, all right. No one who knows Bill Bennett, 44, doubts that. Nor has there been much doubt where he has been headed in the cross-country world that has taken him to 102 elementary and secondary schools in 3 years, plus scores of service clubs and state legislatures. Watch him as he visits number 88, the Amherst Middle School near Nashua, New Hampshire.
Then watch him as he makes a hasty getaway when the teachers begin turning on him for screwing things up so bad. The Amherst faculty beams as Bennett rumbles in, trailed by aides. He smiles, waves, pats shoulders, walking canted forward from the waist as though leaning into a wind. Bennett is a big man, 6 feet 2 inches, 216 pounds. A friend once pointed him out as the one who looks like a buffalo. Bennett is in Nashua to praise Amherst as a school of excellence, one that does well without begging for federal money. "Insofar as people look to Washington for solutions, they're wrong," says Bennett. At these whistle stops, Bennett usually teaches a class, something his wife, Elaine, an ex-teacher, challenged him to do. "Get out and see if you can do it," she said.
Yes, Bennett was once pointed out as the one who looks like a buffalo. What the article doesn't tell us is that Bennett was also referred to as the one who smells like a buffalo. He can. Scrunching into a child's chair in an 8th grade English class, Bennett speaks softly. "You don't want to scare me," explains later. When the pupils' questions become too route, Bennett teases. "Some kids asked me if the Secret Service was here. See that big guy back there," he says, pointing to a hulking bodyguard. "If you guys make a move for me, you're in trouble."
Of course, you're in trouble anyway if you make a move on Bennett. That is, unless you're a homosexual. The kids love him. So does the rest of the school, which roars happily at the award ceremony. Then, running late, he makes a wild 85-mile-per-hour run to Concord to address the New Hampshire legislature. In Governor John Sununu's office, Bennett asks Senate President Bill Bartlett, "How long shall I do?" 3 minutes, says Bartlett, plenty of time for some guy from Washington.
In my opinion, even 3 minutes is too much time to give to a windbag from Washington. By the way, how does Bennett get away with driving through New Hampshire at 85 miles per hour and not get pulled over for speeding? Bennett guffaws. He revels in this backroom camaraderie, the rough and tumble of what he is doing. It seems a grown-up version of the heavy contact touch football that Bennett loves to play on fall weekends, and may symbolize the life he would choose had he been born faster afoot and eternally young. Bennett plays the theme of frugal independence to these flinty lawmakers. The key to excellence is local control. You cannot spend your way to excellence, he says, to approving nods.
This only proves that Bennett is a professional politician. Imagine someone from Washington saying that money doesn't buy excellence. How do you think he became Secretary of Education anyway? Good looks? Then he is off again for a sprint to Boston's Logan Airport en route to a final flourish in Atlanta. Bennett seems to revel, too, in these dashes, riding the fast lane in cars, in conversation, in politics. He's got a big ego and he knows it, says an associate. At Logan, Press Secretary Loy Miller tells him of an invitation from a TV talk show. Crossfire wants you Saturday, he says. Not Saturday, replies Bennett, a homebody who scorns the Potomac syndrome of working the restaurants at night. He snorts, a big status thing in Washington is 20 pink slips in your desk, covered with stuff at 7:30 in the evening. My desk is clear. You work hard, and then you go to your family.
Of course, if I had 20 or 30 aides to help me keep my desk clear, I'd be able to spend more time with my family, too. He is adamant about skipping the Capitol's heavy poll bashes. Nobody ever says anything at those things, he grumbles. By reports, he has turned down invitations from George Bush. Bennett confesses he'd rather be home watching Dragon Slayer on the Disney Channel with Elaine and their son John, 4.
I'll bet you didn't know that most of Bennett's ideas for running America's schools come from Disneyland anyway. No wonder he watches the Disney Channel. It's where he gets most of his ideas. This close family life is precious to Bennett, a Catholic whose parents divorced 40 years ago, when pious folk did not. His mother, who disliked the rich and called the family us common folk, moved Bill, an older brother Bob, and their Hungarian grandmother from Brooklyn to Washington. There, Bennett flourished at Gonzaga High, a Jesuit school. The only guy in the honors class to be starting on the football team, he brags. But he chafed under the discipline of the fathers. They regarded me as a smarty pants, and they were absolutely right, he says.
They also regarded him as stinky pants, and they were absolutely right about that, too. At the same time, he began to develop a ravenous ambition. At 17, he got into elite Williams College in Massachusetts. Grandma scraped together $200 for clothes. She knew there were a lot of guys from St. Paul's and Andover, and that I ought to dress up to speed, he recalls.
Bennett has this thing about speeding, doesn't he? I just wonder what kind of example he thinks he's setting for the youth of America, who are always being warned to slow down when driving. At Williams, he got daily letters from her. She read all his major texts so she could trade notes on them. To help pay tuition, Bennett waited on tables and worked summers, hauling furniture while earning honors, playing football, and strumming a rock guitar, the very model of the 1960s liberal student. Civil rights concerns nudged him toward the Liberal Students for a Democratic Society, which later turned violently radical. But Brother Bob talked him out of it, advising that someday SDS might not look good on his resume.
Bob forgot to tell him that KKK wouldn't look swell on a resume either. A resentment at privilege began to boil and still simmers today. I really dislike snobs, he growls, pretentious people who mistreat people who have to work for them. I hate them. This anger congealed into a hard-edged populism as Bennett took a Ph.D. in philosophy at the University of Texas, then served as a dean of liberal arts at Boston University, all under brilliant, acerbic John Silber, who was then undergoing a conversion from liberal to born-again conservative.
They say that Bennett took a Ph.D.? I thought you have to earn those things. Bennett refined his own convert's faith as director of the National Humanities Center in North Carolina, and then at age 38 as head of the National Endowment for the Humanities in Washington. At NEH, Bennett accused college faculties of collective loss of nerve and faith for serving up trendy courses at the expense of classic Western studies. He spurned affirmative action quotas in NEH hiring, arguing that quotas were discriminatory.
Bennett was absolutely right about quotas being discriminatory. Because of the quota system, Bennett wasn't able to hire as many family members as he would have liked to. Mary Futrell, president of the powerful National Education Association, has called Bennett's record on civil rights less than exemplary. Bennett retorts, if you don't think people should be given things or have things taken away on the basis of race or sex, if you believed that in 1965, you were a liberal. If you believe it now, you're a conservative.
And if you believe it 10 years from now, you're a putz. Bennett's style caught the approving attention of Attorney General Edwin Meese, who recommended him as Secretary of Education. the bottom-ranked cabinet slot. Bennett recalls, "The president said, I can't get rid of this department, but since we have it, I'd like you to represent the views of the American people and not the education interest groups. I said, fine, that's what I'd like to do." He has done so with gusto, greatly aggrandizing the position while so-called education interest groups, including university people and members of Congress, chafed at the notion that their own agendas were not of the people. Silber, who wanted the job himself, dismisses his protege as the sorcerer's apprentice.
We asked Silber why he actually had the nerve to call Bennett a sorcerer's apprentice, and he told us, "The devil made me do it." Bennett began by roasting college students as easy riders who beach-bummed on tax-supported loans. He then accused the Supreme Court of a fastidious disdain for religion, for banning use of public funds for remedial programs and parochial schools. He trampled on congressional toes with public calls for sub-basement education budgets, which Congress rejected, rather than tactfully negotiating compromises in committee.
His apparent lack of tact explains why he landed the lowest-ranking cabinet position, doesn't it? Reaction was quick and furious. Augustus Hawkins, Democratic chairman of the House Committee on Education and Labor, awarded the new secretary a failing grade. Connecticut's Republican Senator Lowell Weicker fumed that Bennett and his views should not be allowed out of the education building, much less outside Washington.
The problem is that Bennett and his views are getting out of the education building and Washington. The problem is they're both getting into the American school system. So pervasive were the counterattacks that even the cocky Bennett felt abashed. "I underestimated the size of the microphone I had," he says. Bob, a Washington lawyer, offered some new big brotherly advice. Says Bennett, "He's got this big fish mounted in his office." And he said, "You know why that fish is up there? Because he opened his mouth. That's why."
And you know why Bennett is getting attacked? Because he opened his mouth. That's why. Bennett has since attacked the likes of Harvard for jacking costs above $12,000 with the help of federal student loan support and for ripping off undergraduates with suffused curriculums that Bennett derides as core elite. He has detonated heavy controversy by advocating federal vouchers to finance parental choice among public schools, typically, say opponents, white schools for white kids living in mixed neighborhoods. He has called for AIDS testing of all marriage license applicants, hospital patients, and convicts, and has unloaded on Republicans and Democrats alike who oppose the president's Iranian and Contra policies. All that after Brother Bob told him about the fish. He sees a complex federal agency as a bully pulpit, comments Joseph Duffy, Chancellor of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and Bennett's predecessor at NEH. It's the temperament of a preacher. Hawkins has another, perhaps more canny perspective. Bennett gives the answers of a professional politician rather than a professional educator, a judgment some observers see as the sum of his many parts.
It is true that Bennett is more of a politician than an educator. Let's face it, he worked for the same president that declared ketchup as a vegetable. Only a politician would go along with an idea as stupid as that. The contentious Bennett has made no bones about using the office to preach. "This is the appropriate job for the Secretary of Education," says he, "where your powers to say and be heard are much greater than your powers to make things be." At the same time, he emerged as a formidable doer within the party. When the news came out that Supreme Court nominee Douglas Ginsburg had smoked pot as a law professor at Harvard, Bennett made a critical call to Ginsburg, urging him to end his candidacy. Nor in recent months has he shown signs of easing back on either the frequency or muzzle velocity of his comments on education. Some sample shots?
Oh, I get it. It's not okay for Ginsburg to break the law a long time ago by smoking pot and therefore be banned from public office, but it is okay for Bennett to break the law by speeding while he is in public office. Something doesn't add up here. Now those sample shots. Star teachers ought to get salary increases. At the other end, throw out the incompetent people. They're killing the profession.
Yeah, let's start by throwing out Bennett. He seems to fit the incompetent image pretty well, and he is killing the education profession. Alan Bloom, author of The Closing of the American Mind, is a brilliant man, very good for higher education, but much too despairing. He doesn't see the happiness and spontaneity of American life. I hate that prissy crap, where he's anti-rock and roll.
Wait a minute. Bennett doesn't like Bloom because he's anti-rock and roll, but he doesn't like Ginsburg because he smokes pot. I think we're dealing with a frustrated hippie here. What makes me happy is seeing a good school and knowing more than all my critics.
Sorry, Mr. Bennett. As long as you're Secretary of Education, you strike out on both counts. He has saved his real shockers for cabinet colleagues. When an old friend, Justice Department spokesman Terry Eastland, was fired by Meese, Bennett declared bluntly, "Terry Eastland's an excellent man. He can join me at the department any time."
Along with all the other incompetent people on his staff who were fired from other government jobs. With that stroke, Bennett distanced himself from the wreckage of the expiring regime. He also began to establish himself for the future as very much his own man. "Look," he told a reporter, "I put country above party. Always have." Then he added, "I know that I'm popular with audiences out there in the country, and it doesn't seem to make much difference whether they're Democrats or Republicans."
As long as they don't complain about the quality of the education their kids are getting. Bill Bennett may be leaving this administration, but when he says things like that, he does not sound like a man who has given up public service for good. So what might lie ahead for him? Right now, he says, "If I were going to run for anything in the future, I'd want to run for president."
Let's face it, even Bill Bennett would be a better candidate for president than Dan Quayle.
잘 들어보셨죠? 얼마나 이해가 되셨습니까? 그러면 지금부터 해설 강의 시작하도록 하겠습니다. Profile, Preacher, Teacher, Get Fly by Ezra Bowen. He has been a dazzling bit of footwork even for a world-class dancing man like William Bennett. 그것은 아주 그 dazzling 현란한 눈부신 아주 현혹적인 그 bit of footwork 그 발놀림 발동작의 그 일부였다. 발동작의 그 동작이었다. Even for a world-class dancing man like William Bennett. 아주 국제적으로 그 이름난 세계적인 그 클래스급의 그 댄싱맨인 그 윌리엄 베네프 같은 사람에게도 심지어 그런 사람에 대해서도 그건 아주 참 눈부신 그 아주 빠른 발동작이었다. Since he took office in February 1985, the brash Secretary of Education has turned himself into the most visible and surely the most honorable member of the Reagan team. 그가 그 1985년에 그 취임한 이래 the brash Secretary of Education. 이 brash는 아주 성마른, 무모한, 아주 건방진, 귀에 거슬리는 말을 하는 그런 뜻이죠. 이렇게 이제 건방진 그 교육부 장관이 그 자신을 만들었다. into the most visible and surely the most honorable member. 가장 그 눈에 띄는 그리고 틀림없이 가장 그 잘 들리는 그 레이건 팀의 레이건 행정부의 가장 눈에 띄고 가장 발언권이 강한 멤버로다가 곧 금방 그 자신을 변모시켰다. 그러니까 이렇게 빠르게 금방 가장 인기 있고 주목받는 장관이 되겠느냐? 이렇게 아주 국제적인 그 수준의 그 댄싱맨이라도 아마 이렇게 빨리 빠른 발동작으로 그의 그 주목을 끌기는 힘들 거다 그 소리죠. During the primaries, he flirted with the various presidential aspirers who eyed him as a running mate. 그 예비 선거 기간 동안 그는 플러트했다. 플러트 위드는 무엄마 장난치다, 희롱거리다 그런 소리죠. 여자와 희롱거리다. 그러니까 그 여러 다양한 대통령 후보자들, 대통령을 열망하는 사람들과 누구냐면 who eyed him as a running mate. 그를 갖다가 한번 러닝 메이트 그 부통령 후보로 눈여겨본 점치고는 여러 그 열망하는 대통령 후보자들과 놀아났다, 농담했다. I danced with the old girls, he chuckled. 나는 모든 그 아가씨들과 춤춘다. 여기는 대통령 후보자를 이렇게 칭한 거죠. So, was he hungry for higher office? 그가 그 높은 직위를 위해서 몹시 그 배가 고팠을까? 그렇게 열망했을까? I'm not running for anything, he said. 나는 I'm not running for anything. 아무에도 출마 안 한다. He said, amid a riptide of administration defectees, Bennett held fast. 그는 말하기를 나는 아무것도 출마 안 하겠다. 이 어밋은 뭐 한가운데, 립타이드는 그 조충, 역조, 이안류, 그 파도끼리 부딪혀서 큰 그 파도를 일으키는 그 파도의 그 충돌이죠. 그러니까 이 administration defects, 행정부에서 여러 장관들이 떠나가는 그 난조 속에서도 어려움 속에서도 베넷 held fast. 베넷은 아주 그냥 단단히 끝까지 견고하게 견뎠다. 이때 농담 나오죠. William Bennett was also one of the very few Reagan team members who didn't get fired in the Iran-Contra scandal either. 베네트는 그 이러한 그 컨트라 스캔들로다가 그 해고되지 않은 유일한 해고되지 않은 몇몇 장관 중에 윌리엄 베넷 역시 한 멤버였다. Then on May 9th, Bennett told Reagan he was quitting in September to lecture and write. 그리고 나서 그때 그 5월 9일 날 베네트는 레이건에게 강의나 하고 저술 활동하기 위해서 난 그만둔다. 라고 말했다. But no kiss and tell stuff. That's not my style. He growled. 그러나 나는 kiss and tell stuff. 그 공직 중에서 얻은 그 여러 가지 정보를 나가서 팔아먹는, 특히 그 상관의 스캔들, 여자 스캔들 관계를 팔아서 회고록을 써서 돈 버는 그런 사람이 난 아니다. 나는 그런 식의 이유가 아니다. 라고 he growled. 으르렁거리며 말했다. 아주 그 큰 소리로 투덜거리며 크게 말했다. Bennett, however, has more than one agenda. 그러나 베네트는 할 일이 하나만 있는 게 아니다. 이 스케줄이 어젠다죠. 여러 가지 스케줄이 있다. He is consulting with the Republican Platform Committee as it prepares for next month's convention where he will be a prime-time speaker. 그는 he is consulting with the Republican Platform Committee, 그 공화당 그 정강위원회와 상의한다, 자문한다, 컨설트한다. 왜냐하면 그것이 그 다음 달에 그 전당대회를 준비하기 때문에. 근데 거기에서 그는 프라임 타임 스피커가 될 거다. 이 소위 텔레비에서 골든 아워라 그러는데 이게 프라임 타임이죠. 가장 중요한 시간에, 즉 청취자가 가장 많이 보는 시간대에 전당대회에서 그는 연설할 것이다. Top Republicans have approached him about 스피커가 될 거다. 이 소위 텔레비에서 골든 아워라 그러는데 이게 프라임 타임이죠. 가장 중요한 시간에, 즉 청취자가 가장 많이 보는 시간대에 전당대회에서 그는 연설할 것이다. Top Republicans have approached him about running for the Senate. 아주 고위 공화당의 고위 당직자들이, 높은 사람들이 그에게 접근했다. 상원에 출마해보는 게 어떠냐라고 이제 접근했다. After watching some of the people in the stakes for the presidency, I could do better than that. 그러니까 나는 살펴본 후에 몇몇이 in the stakes는 이때 대통령에 출마한 사람들이죠. 이 stakes라는 건 노름에 건 돈입니다. 그러니까 모험을 하는, 즉 대통령에 출마한 사람들 in the stakes for the presidency. 대통령에 출마한 몇 사람들을 보고 난 후에 나는 그거보다 더 잘할 수 있다. 즉 상원에 출마하는 것보다는 더 낫게 할 수 있다. As a vice presidential candidate, 그럼 부통령 후보로일까요? I'm not sure I'd make a very good number two man, he retorts. 나는 아주 제2 number two man이 훌륭한 number two man이 될 수 있을까? 라고 나는 자신하지 못한다. 라고 그는 응수한다, 반론한다, 반박한다죠. I like to run things. 나는 사물들을, 여러 가지를 운영하는 걸 좋아한다. If Bennett likes to run things so much, then how come the American education system is in the shambles it's in today? Yeah, Bennett's a real hard-driving genius, all right. 만약에 베네트가 여러 가지 일을 갖다가 직접 진두지휘 운영하는 것을 좋아한다면 그렇게, 그럼 어째서 오늘날의 미국 교육제도가 이렇게 개판일까, 난장판일까? 그래, 베네트는 정말이지 hard driving, 아주 강력하게 밀어붙이는 열심히 일하는 천재다. alright, 좀 비꼰 소리죠. No one who knows Bill Bennett, 44, doubts that. 44세 베네트를 아는 사람은 그것을 의심하는 사람 아무도 없다. Nor has there been much doubt where he has been headed in the cross-country war that has taken him to 1 or 202 elementary and secondary schools in 3 years, plus scores of services clubs and state legislatures. 아무도 의심 안 할 뿐 아니라 또 거기에도 그 의심할 여지가 없다. 어디냐면은 그런 he has been headed in the cross country war, 아주 전국을 돌아다니는 아주 회오리 바람처럼 누비고 돌아다니는데 어디 얼마큼 돌아다니냐면은 that has taken him to 102 elementary and secondary schools in 3 years. 3년 안에 3년 동안에 그 102개의 국민학교와 중학교를 돌아다닌 그 회오리 바람처럼 돌아다닌 거예요. 그것을 봐더라도 거기에도 의심할 여지가 없다. 게다가 또 플러스 scores of service clubs, 그 서비스 봉사단체나 각 주의 그 의회 이런 데를 돌아다닌 걸 봐더라도 거기에도 의심할 게 없다. Watch him as he visits number 88, the Amherst Middle School near Nashua, New Hampshire. 한번 보라. 그가 그 88번은 그 뭐 교육구 이름이겠죠. 그 학교 뭐 넘버든지 코드 넘버든지 내시아 뉴햄프셔에 있는 그 엠허스트 미들 스쿨을 갔다가 방문했을 때를 한번 보라. 이때 또 조킹 나오죠. Then watch him as he makes a hasty getaway when the teachers begin turning on him for screwing things up so bad. 그러면 그때 한번 보라. As he makes a hasty getaway. 아주 성급히 도망갈 때를 한번 보라. 언제 when the teachers begin turning on him. 선생들이 그에게 그 공격의 화살을 돌릴 때 무엇 때문에 for screwing things up so bad. 이렇게 여러 가지를 망쳐놓은 거에 대해서 그를 비난하시 할 때 한번 도망가는 것 좀 보자. The Amherst faculty beams as Bennett rumbles in. Amherst의 그 교사와 그 학교 그 교무처 직원들은 환히 웃는다. As Bennett rumbles in. 우르릉거리면서 덜커덕 소리를 내면서 들어올 때. Trailed by 8. 그 부관들이 쭉 뒤에 따라서 아주 덜컹거리며 들어올 때 beams는 환하게 웃는다 그 소리죠. He smiles, waves, past shoulders, walking canted toward from the waist as though leaning into wind. 그는 그 미소 짓고 손을 흔들고 past shoulders, 어깨를 쳐주고 walking canted, 꾸부렁하게 기울여서 꾸부정하게 들어올 때 앞으로 향해서 허리로부터 앞으로 허리로부터 앞으로 이렇게 앞으로 향해서 구부리고 마치 그 바람 속에 기대는 것처럼 허리에서부터 고개를 이렇게 아래로 기울이고 걸어 들어오면서 그는 어깨도 치고 뭐 손짓하고 웃고 그런다 그 소리죠. Bennett is a big man, 6 feet 2 inches, 216 pounds. 베네트는 아주 등치가 큰 사람이다. 216파운드에 6피트 2인치다. A friend once pointed him out as the one who looks like a buffalo. 한 친구가 그는 마치 그 들소같이 보인다고 그를 지적했다. Bennett is in Nashua to praise Amherst as a school of excellence, one that does well without begging for federal money. 베네트는 내슈아에 왔다 칭찬하려고 표창하려고 엠허스트 학교를 갔다 아주 탁월한 학교라고. One that does well without begging for federal money. 연방 정부 즉 그 교육청에다가 문교부에다가 그 federal money 연방 돈을 달라고 구걸하지 않는 아주 잘하는 학교라고 칭찬 표창으로 여기 와 있다. In so far as people look to Washington for solution, they are wrong. 그들의 그 문제를 해결하기 위하여 워싱턴 쪽을 쳐다본다. 워싱턴에 의존한다. 워싱턴에 바라보면서 손 벌린다면은 그들은 잘못이다. says Bennett. 라고 베네트는 말한다. At these whistle stops, Bennett usually teaches a class, something his wife Elaine, an ex-teacher, challenged him to do. 이러한 그 휘슬스탑에서 휘슬스탑은 그 호루루기를 불면서 기차가 서는 아주 간이역이 있는 산골의 조그만 마을을 휘슬스탑이라고 합니다. 원 호스 타운이라고도 그러죠. 이 시골 마을에서 베네트는 통상 교실에 가서 강의를 하는데 something 그의 와이프인 엘레인이 그 엑스-티처 전직 교사인 부인이 challenge him to do 한번 해보라고 도전해보라고 권장한 그 어떤 것이다. 그러니까 시골의 학교에 오면은 그는 강의를 한다. Get out and see if you can do it, she said. 나가서 한번 당신이 직접 할 수 있는가 보라. 이렇게 그 부인은 늘 말했다 그 소리죠. Yes, Bennett was once pointed out as the one who looks like a buffalo. 맞습니다. 베네트는 한때 그 아주 들소같이 보이는 사람이라고 그 지적을 받았습니다. What the article doesn't tell us is that Bennett was also referred to as the one who smells like a buffalo. 그러나 이 기사, 즉 이 프로파일에서 우리들에게 말해주지 않는 것은 that이하다. 베네트는 역시 뭐로 지칭되느냐면은 아주 버펄러 같이 냄새가 나는 사람이라고 지적을 안 해준 것이 이 기사에서 그 지적이 이 기사에 빠져 있다. 이 정도의 농담이죠. 자, A면 강의 마치고 B면에서 다시 만나도록 합시다.